Perfect.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the 2022 Freedom Network USA Anti-Human Trafficking Conference. This session today is Scaling Impact with Cloud-Based Data Solutions. So my name is Amanda Norwood, and I'm the Operations Specialist at Freedom Network.
Wonderful. And I am Cherry. I am the founder of AirOps Consulting. We help lots of organizations scale their operations, and we've helped many nonprofits scale their programs with smarter data solutions in this new era. So I think we are both very excited to be sharing this talk together, because I think Amanda and I together are more than the sum of our parts, in that Amanda brings the industry expertise and I am bringing the technical know-how. So thank you so much for joining us. We want to start off this talk about technology with a quote, being technology is the great leveler. And I think there are many parallels between the work that Freedom Network is doing and all of its membership organizations are doing. So I will let Amanda speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I definitely feel that technology has helped us as our organization tries to scale up the resources that we can provide to survivors. So it's helped us maintain our organization and has increased our capacity to serve survivors as well as our members for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really great space to talk about it, because technology has so many different applications, whether it's in the educational space or in receiving information and helping people reintegrate into society. I think there's lots of opportunities that it's providing. And personally, for me, my North Star is to be able to have my own education nonprofit one day, because technology is a great leveler. So I think I'm especially excited about speaking here with everyone, because I've got so much to learn from this community, from all the great work that everyone's doing. As we start this conversation around technology, I wanted to show a fun 2x2 matrix of where technology usually gets put on the map. And Amanda, would you agree?
Absolutely. So definitely when you're dealing with like a newer organization or a newer program, especially, we know that technology is important, but we have all these other tasks that are on our plate. So it often gets a little bit left behind. So we know we have things to do there, but we are so overwhelmed with other tasks, we kind of overlook it at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always going to be more urgent and more important things, like that email that's in the inbox right now, or maybe a deadline that you know you've got coming up, but super important to also focus on the non-urgent but important things, like attending a thought leadership conference like this, or attending a talk about technology, or evaluating your own technology systems. So I think there's lots of ways that we can spend our time. So again, thank you everyone for being here, because technology is one of those non-urgent but very important things. We'll go through the agenda for today's talk. First, we're going to talk a little bit about a solution that my company works with called Airtable. It's a cloud-based relational database tool, and we'll explain a little bit more about what that is. In terms of next steps, we will go through 2 demos of how Freedom Network and Justice at Last has been able to use Airtable for their organizations. And lastly, we'll talk about what you can do for your organization. So Amanda, you've been a user of Airtable, of course, through the project that we worked on together for Freedom Network. So in your words, what is Airtable to you?
So I'll start off this with saying it's Excel, but much, much better. The way that you are able to enter data, sort through data, is very useful for us. We use it with our survivor reentry project, which we'll do a demo of later in this session. But we also use it in other programs throughout Freedom Network. And it's been great to be able to easily collaborate, not just within the organization, but also with outside partners, and have an easy way to store and access data.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a database tool. And I think with what Amanda was saying, this spreadsheets, but so much more powerful element is that relational part of it, because you're able to connect different types of data together instead of saving them in separate spreadsheets and then having to comb through the data at a later date. It's also super beneficial to be able to have a database tool where you can have a single source of truth for your data, both for internal collaboration and external collaboration. As you can see, the slides, we've got a couple of different interfaces inside of Airtable. There's lots of different ways of looking at things, so it's very customizable. It's also taking the private sector by storm right now, so I'm very excited to be sharing this new tool with the community here. So in terms of how Airtable can be used, we talked about the cloud-based, we talked about the relational database aspect of it, being able to connect different pieces of information. When we're talking about cloud-based, I think it's been a buzzword that's getting thrown around a lot. Amanda, can you remember a time when everyone was using Word documents on their and saving it on their local computers and emailing back and forth? Yeah.
You would read multiple versions and you're not sure
Yeah.
which was the latest. And
Yeah. Exactly. And emailing back and forth and kind of tapping your colleague on the shoulder to say, hey, did you have version 11A, or does Sally have version 14B right now? What are we working with? So having a cloud-based software, whether you're using Airtable, or maybe you remember the first time when you used Google Docs and finally it's like you don't have to email things back and forth anymore. Maybe the first time you used Dropbox. So that cloud-based aspect is super important. Integrations as well. So Airtable comes with a whole host of integrations, whether it's with your email or Twilio. Some people use that to send out text messages. Many people will integrate it with their Gmail or Google Calendar to save dates for different types of events. Integrations also come through the form of a Zapier integration or a Tegromat integration that connects Airtable to all sorts of different tools and has been very helpful for many of our clients. And one of my favorite things is automations. So it's been really great to be able to implement automations for many of our clients. And we've certainly got many automations in the Freedom Network space. Amanda, do you have any favorite use cases for automations?
yeah, so it makes it really easy to automate different tasks. For example, for the conference, we've been using it so that when people submit their agreements form for their for the vaccine requirement, once we approve that within Airtable, they automatically get sent an email confirming that we've reviewed and approved their vaccine document. So it just makes it so much easier. It takes that extra step out of noting in your spreadsheet that that document has been reviewed, and then going to your email account and sending an email out confirming with the person. It just makes it much easier.
Yeah, and it's that compounding effect, right? Because that single email, it might take you a couple of minutes, but when there are tens or hundreds or thousands of people attending a conference, or when you have to do that, sort of fast, but also repetitive things so many different times, as the context switching that really gets you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and not having things slip through the cracks is such a amazing way to work. Last but not least, interfaces. Amanda, I'm not sure how much you've seen of interfaces. Oh, and I definitely forgot to move the slide forward here. I'm not sure how much you've seen of interfaces, but it's a new tool that Airtable launched recently. It feels a little bit like an internal portal. It certainly helps us show information, show the most relevant information to the people who need to see it. And we'll see an example of that in a moment. So in a nutshell, I would certainly describe data as the plumbing of your business. So if you imagine a home analogy, you need really good plumbing and electrical, all the things that's happening in the background to be functioning and working for you to have a really great, safe, and warm home. So that's sometimes how I think about Airtable, is to really give you that foundation for your data.
And just adding on to that, we know that data is important, making sure that we have all of our, if you're doing direct services with survivors, making sure you have all of their information is collected properly, and so that you're best able to serve that survivor. But it's also important for grant and fundraising efforts. So you want to be able to show off your work and show off how many survivors you're supporting, and what you're doing for those survivors. So it's definitely important to have your data organized. And this is a great way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot emphasize that point enough. For all the impact reports out there, we want to make that as easy as possible. So now that you know a little bit about Airtable, I'm going to show a demo in a moment of a database very similar to what we built for Justice at Last. It's much simpler. Justice at Last has a whole bunch of this grant reporting element tied into the base. I will show you a much simpler version of that. But Amanda, for our listeners and attendees who don't know or aren't familiar with Justice at Last, what is their organization all about?
Yeah, so Justice at Last is one of our member organizations with Freedom Network. So at Freedom Network, we have about 90 organizations that are members who are all doing direct services to assist survivors of human trafficking. So Justice at Last is one of our member organizations. They've been a longstanding member at Freedom Network, and they're based out of California. And I think, Cherry, I think you have the mission that you're able to read. Yeah.
Absolutely. Their goal is to be able to help survivors of human trafficking and give them a voice to be able to define justice on their own terms. So really wonderful mission and purpose. It's been an absolute pleasure working with Carolyn and her team.
Absolutely.
So I will exit out of this presentation for a moment so we can take a look at our demo base. So the Justice at Last base, this was really built for internal collaboration. I've simplified it significantly and have replaced, there's no identifying information in what I'll show you in either of the demos. And this space is really set up for internal collaboration. So inside of an organization that's providing services to survivors, there's going to be people who answer the initial questions and maybe do some of the screening up front. And given that this is a legal service provider, it's very important for their legal team to also do a longer and more in-depth intake. So over here, we've got some of the structure of the base, which you can see. We've got survivors and cases. So a survivor can have multiple different cases that's ongoing. So perhaps there are child custody cases or criminal victim witness cases. And this is where the relational database aspect is so important, because you can have a survivor with 1, 2, or 3 different cases. And in a similar vein, you can also have provided services for cases. So over here, we've got these tables up here. The provided services are things like phone calls that might have been done, or emails that might have been sent out on behalf of that case. And of course, when we're looking at this view of Airtable, we can create different views in here. There are many different form views to collect information, for example. And there are different groupings for views. So you can really customize this to what you want. And one of the major improvements that Airtable made recently is around their interfaces. And that's really what I want to show you today. So there are 2 interfaces that I've set up for this space. And they are a reporting interface, which you just got a peek at, and also a survivor and case interface. And Amanda, maybe this is your first time looking at this too. I'm not so sure, but
Yeah, interfaces is a newer feature, so we haven't
yes,
had much of a chance
absolutely.
to integrate it yet. So I'm very
Yeah.
curious.
Great. We'll discover this together. So very helpful tool for internal teams to collaborate, because like I said earlier, if you are a member organization at Freedom Network, you're going to have multiple different team members. And the first iteration of this interface is one where we see every new inquiry and all of the people who are in a screening stage. Now, you probably have way more fields you're collecting as part of your organization or as part of your screening, but for a team member to be able to look at just the relevant information for them is really important. So over here, we've got first and last name, gender, some basic information about the survivor. And then you can see anyone who's new, they don't actually have their screening questions filled in yet. So at some point, you might be interested in moving this person to screening and then start filling in these questions of where the trafficking happened, maybe in the US, the year it started, into 2020. And this is going to be the foundation of your screening interface. So you might be calling that person and filling in the questions as you go. And you can see and click on anyone that's in this phase, and their information will change along with the data. And then the second stage would be our legal intake stage. So in the beginning, we've established that the screening questions went through and they are eligible to receive services. Then you might get to this view here, where you still have the initial information that we saw earlier, but now everyone on this list is in the legal intake stage. And in the legal intake questions, there are, I've just put in placeholder questions. There are 10 of them. Now, legal intakes are probably much longer. You might have 50 or 100 different questions in different categories. related to the case. But over here, this is, again, super exciting because that person doing the legal intake will see all their relevant information. And once the legal intake is done, maybe now we're actually providing the service, whether you're providing housing services or maybe you're providing legal services. Now there's a case that's been opened for the survivor, and all the cases are down here, so I can toggle between the different cases. And likely for a client, for an organization actually using this, you're going to have many different fields of information on the case. But right here, I've just got the practice area, the case type, and the status. And this is, all three of these interfaces. All of the data came from this backend grid view inside of Airtable. And as you edit the data, that gets reflected immediately inside of Airtable as well. And here you can also add provided services. So you can say, well, I provided a service for an advocacy call, and the note is XYZ, and the date provided was today. And over here, I've got the ability to attach documents. So like Amanda was saying, if Freedom Network is checking off everyone's vaccine documentation, that's a place where they can submit documents. And Amanda's probably smiling because that's exactly how they did it through a form. And then you can view all of those documents inside of the base itself. And over here, I've also got another field here, and this is my grant funding category. And super, super important, because when Amanda talked about, reporting, whether it's impact reporting or grant funding reporting, if the team in your organization can spend the few seconds right now as they're adding in and logging information to add in that grant funding categories, that's going to save a ton of time later on at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year from someone having to manually do everything. So now I will X out of this, and you can see over here, I've got some blank documents in here. So if you got documents attached, then you can view that as well. Okay, great. And now back on to the grant funding aspect of it. So over here, I've got my grant funding categories and subcategories in a couple of different tabs here. And this is, I modeled this based on the Cal Yes reporting, which we helped Justice at Last through. It's very detail oriented, and there's lots of different subcategories. And this is probably half or less than half of the categories that actually exist. So at some point when Carolyn first started at Justice at Last, she let me know that this was taking her about a day to do. And after Airtable was introduced to her team, it took her about an hour to pull the quarterly reporting. So it's a great way to be able to kind of get all the information in at once, have a single source of truth, and the reporting is actually updating live. And we will go back to our interface related to reporting. And over here, this is, Freedom Network also has another version of this, which we'll talk about in a moment. I think they're fairly similar, just looks a little bit different. But we've got the number of inquiries, which is getting pulled from the raw data. There's been 192 inquiries. in our sample data set, and we've got 44 people in that screening or legal intake stage, and then also 27 active cases. So you can also look at survivors by status and survivors by race. Again, this is another demographic piece of information that many grant reporting reporting schemes require. And down here, we've got the provided services by grant funding category as well. And also for the subcategories as well here. So Amanda, looking at this, what is your initial take on interfaces?
Yeah, I definitely want to start using them and setting them up. So I might reach out to you. But yeah, I noticed how you were mentioning for grant reporting. I know a lot of our members, as well as other organizations in the field, for grant reporting, especially for any federal or state grants, they do require a lot of information, and they want very detailed reports. So this is a great way to organize this and make things a lot simpler and a lot faster. So you save time.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly there's lots of time saved when it comes to grant reporting. And I remember going through the Cal OES reporting before, and the way they do quarters is, in January, you need to count everybody. And then in April, you only count the new people. So there's just lots of layers of challenges, and it's very difficult to do that if you're tracking your data in 5 or 7 different spreadsheets.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And the main point around better reporting is not only for grant reporting, but it's also the impact reports that many nonprofit organizations will release at the end of the year. It's great to be able to pull those numbers easily and be able to trust them, as well as alluding to what you talked about before, being able to support and empower the teams to deliver new programs and scale those programs. Yeah. And finally, collaboration is an obvious one. Just knowing where all the information is saved is just so incredible, and everyone knows where things are. And then I'd love to talk about our second demo, which is for Freedom Network.
Yeah.
Amanda, would you like to give a little bit of context around the Survivor Reentry Project?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Survivor Reentry Project is a program that helps connect trafficking survivors with pro bono legal support so that they can try to clear criminal records that are related to their trafficking experience. So survivors often have criminal records for a variety of charges that are based on crimes they were forced to commit by their trafficker. So it could be prostitution, it could be drug offenses, it could be fraud. There's a wide variety of crimes that survivors have been forced to commit by their trafficker. And it is a very lengthy and a very complicated process to try to get those crimes off of their criminal records, to clear their criminal records. So the project came to Freedom Network in 2019, and we had to kind of build it up in our own systems and find an easy way to gather all the data that we're collecting from survivors, have that in one place, and then have a way for the pro bono partners, our legal firms that are providing pro bono services. They need a way to access that information that we're collecting from survivors so that they can provide services and support.
Absolutely. And how many partners, and these are external partners, are you working with?
So we currently have 6 main pro bono firms that we work with, and we have numerous other partners as well. In the cases where a pro bono firm doesn't have an office in that location. So the survivors have charges all throughout the US, and it's important to connect them with legal services in those locations. So we have many, many partners that we work with, and they definitely need access to the information that we're gathering from survivors, as well as providing us with information after they start assisting survivors.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we can imagine, there's many different relationships that Freedom Network is overseeing. First, you've got the survivors with their partners. And because a survivor can have cases and charges in multiple states, it's a multi-pronged approach of, let's say you've got a charge in 3 different states, then you might get partnered with 3 different partners to actually help you clear those charges from the 3 different states. Yeah, very complex problem and difficult to find a out of the box solution.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's a great place for Airtable to come in handy because it's very flexible, and really we custom built this exactly to what Freedom Networks needs.
And as you can see right here, this first table that Cherry is going through, this is our list of survivors. We do have multiple views there, but there's all of our survivors. So we have a Airtable form that we've integrated with our website so that survivors or service providers can go to our website, fill out this form to request assistance for criminal record relief.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what Cherry is showing you here is an example of someone filling out the form on the website. And once they enter in all of their information, enter in their request, all of that gets automatically uploaded into the Airtable database. So it's all in one area.
Yeah, so this is the record that I just added. And it's very crucial for Freedom Network to then be able to see this information, fill in additional information about the case. For example, maybe they go from a new inquiry to an open case. And then the next step would be to fill in some additional information and ultimately figure out which firm is going to do that intake, right?
Absolutely. So we have our initial intake with the survivor. Once we gather a bit more information about their case and make sure that they are eligible for services, then we provide that information to our firms. So you'll see there, we have a link for our firm 1. So once that is entered there, there's a new view that we set up so the firms can see all of the survivors who have been referred to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And these views are so helpful because you can really scale them to 20 different partners, to however many partners you have, and all the people. So Hannah Smith, the one I just added here, got tied to firm 1 because this is filtered over here. So really the most relevant information for firm 1 is getting shown in their view, and firm 2 will have a very different set of people that they see. And these views are actually shared.
Yeah. So we want to make sure the firms are able to see just the survivors that they're working with. And also they're able to see the most relevant information that they need to proceed with the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And over here, as we earlier attached Cherry, so I added myself as an example for firm one. As we attached Cherry, and my email is over here, I can then send out a notification, because we need some way of helping Amanda and her team notify everyone. And even though that email probably takes a couple minutes to write, because Amanda's very organized and she's got a template, it's so much faster if we can just check off a checkbox to send an email. And once that email has been sent, there is a date that gets added in. I'm just going into my email to pull up that notification.
Yeah.
So over here, oh, sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. Setting up the automations with emails has been such a great help. So as Cherry mentioned, yeah, you could write your own email each time and it would take a couple of minutes. But having just that checkbox there that automatically sends the email makes it so much easier and faster. And you have a standard template that gets sent to everyone. So you don't have to worry about if you've included the correct information every time or if you've left something out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's even just keeping track, whether it's on a spreadsheet or in your own mind. Did I send that email yet?
Yeah.
Personally, that's certainly something I would have trouble with.
Definitely.
Just can't go to bed at nighttime because I'm not sure if I've sent the right emails. Great. So yeah, this is the email here. And of course, we get to look at our full list of people for firm one. And this is all customizable, or rather dynamic information that's getting sent to each firm. So if I had used firm two as a test, then that link would be different. And then we also have the different names and information of the survivor. And the last thing here is we can also see a couple of links for the intake forms. And these are forms, both of these are forms that the partner and the firm is filling in. So at this point, after the email is sent, Amanda has said, you know, this is also in your hands, Cherry. You need to be doing this intake and giving us updates.
Exactly. So we ourselves do an initial screening and then we refer them out to one of our partners to do the intake. So it's important to have a way to send them a form that is very easy for them to fill out and then automatically feeds back into our database with all of the information. So we've set up 2 forms ourselves here. We have a status form so they can let us know what the latest status of the case is. And then the actual intake form for when they've completed the full intake for the survivor. So that might take a couple of sessions for them to do a full intake with the survivor. So we've broken it out into 2 separate forms to make it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really nice to be able to see from a bird's eye view who all of your survivors that you're working with are, and then see what status they've got. So some of them are in the fingerprinting stage, some of them have an initial call scheduled, which is the intake form I just filled in. And then when it comes time for the actual intake form, then you can come in and say, and fill this in as well. And we've also got some conditional fields here. So based on your answer, different fields will show up. So it's kind of dynamic based on the information provided.
And those fields have been very helpful. So with our program, we track where the charges have occurred, what states. Once that gets entered into the form and added to our database, we have different reports that can pull up how many charges are in California, how many charges are in Arkansas. So that all feeds together so that we know the full situation of the case. We can say to our funders as well, like, we really need support in California. They have the most charges. And it's great for advocacy work as well, so that we can work to change policies and say, there are a ton of cases or a ton of charges in Las Vegas. We really need some support here. We really need to pass a new law to see how they're charging survivors and what we can do to remedy that.
Yeah, absolutely. Such impactful uses for this data. So after I submitted this intake form, it's automatically been updated, and the status now shows that the intake has been completed. And then in terms of collaboration, I think this is there's much more to the space than what we've shown here, but it's a great way of kind of getting our feet wet in terms of understanding how Airtable can support this kind of external collaboration between different parties. And earlier, we talked a lot about reporting in Justice at Last case. And over here, we've got also some really valuable reports that can help Freedom Network in their assessment. So when we're looking at survivors based on status, we can see the total number, we can see how many have had their initial intake completed, how many have been referred, and then we can also look at who we referred our survivors to between these 5 firms. And of course, in the actual data, we've got many more firms than just 5. You can also look at the survivors based on their charge type in here, as well as race. Again, this is all just demo data. And you can also look at reporting from different perspectives. So earlier we looked at the survivor reporting, but we can also look at case-related reporting. So over here, you can look at the cases in each status, you can look at the cases in each state, and you can also look at your reporting based on year. I don't think this is working at the moment, but that's okay. Over here, we've also got charge reporting, which is the number of charges that have been cleared and information that's related to each of the charges, again, based on state, based on types of charges, etc.
And what I wanted to just add on to this is that all of these reports are customizable and they are all built directly through Airtable. So it's great to be able to have one place where we can get all of our reports for our data and then customize it based on exactly what we need at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see that lots of new reports were getting added, Amanda. So great work on customizing the data to fit what you want to see. So along the way, we've talked about some of the benefits here in terms of, you started with talking about the impact and the better reporting that you're able to get. Automation wise, were there other automations that stood out to you in your base?
Yeah, so we have an automation that it automatically follows up with a firm after a certain time period. So I think a lot of you may already know this. It can be hard getting responses from people, especially if they don't work directly for your organization. So it's great to have an automation that I don't have to keep reminding myself, oh, I need to follow up. It's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard back. It's automatically set up. So every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, whatever you need, it automatically sends that email to that partner and just says, hey, we haven't heard from you. Can you give us a status update? And it's been great, and it's been a time saver, especially for this project.
Yeah, and you don't have to keep track of every single prawn of that relationship and figure out, oh, when did I last send that email? And then search within your email to find that email that you sent. So yeah, very helpful. Excellent. So we went through these couple of demos, one for internal collaboration and one for external collaboration. Hopefully that gives you a sense of how Airtable can be very flexible in a particular use case. Of all the nonprofits I've worked with, even if they're in the same industry, I don't think anyone has ever built a database that's completely the same. So there's lots of uniqueness to every organization, certainly working with their survivor reentry project, and clients like Justice at Last really illustrated that point for me. So there were lots of smiles as Amanda and I talked through these databases. I think any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and completely agree with this quote here. I think there's lots of opportunities where after people have adopted a new tool, they're just so excited about what they've been able to accomplish or how it enables their team. So what we want to talk about in the next part of this talk is how our listeners and our attendees can bring a little bit of magic into their organizations. So in terms of bringing new tools into your organization, I've shared a few examples of common use cases for Airtable inside of nonprofit organizations. Amanda, you also mentioned that you started using Airtable for other things inside of Freedom Network. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so Airtable really is the main database for our organization. So we use it throughout, I think, pretty much all of our programs at this point. We use it with our members, or to keep track of all of our members. So we have 90 organizational members. Within those organizations, we have individual members. I think we're around like 300 if we count all the individuals for those organizations. So it's a great way to keep track of that. We can organize that by what region they're in. We can organize it by what services they provide for survivors. So a great way for us to keep track of that. I mentioned that we've used it a lot for the conference, for this conference in particular. Everyone who's attending now knows they've had to submit a community agreements form. So that has all been taken care of through Airtable. And we also use it for our policy work, which is another big arm of our organization. It allows for us to easily see how many policy papers we've worked on through the year, and what type of advocacy that we've worked on and what we need to do further. So we've been able to integrate Airtable throughout the majority of our programs, and it's been great for organizing our information.
That's awesome. And I think through our time working together, I've definitely seen Amanda become more confident in using Airtable. So it's been really rewarding to watch. In my experience, there has been many organizations who adopt Airtable for kind of project management as well. I think many people see some parallels between program management and project management. So there's lots of areas for project and project reporting. For many nonprofit organizations, especially if they rely on individual donors, they will also have donation tracking, because Airtable can be integrated with PayPal and with Stripe. So it's great to be able to tie everything together. So you've got your volunteers, your members, your donations that are coming in. Very helpful to be able to see all of that together. And there's also content and marketing calendars for social media or for press releases, event and conference planning, which Amanda has mentioned, and staffing and logistics. So many people have, or many organizations have, these partnership like relationships between a service provider and a recipient of those provided services. And it's great to be able to track those relationships and staff accordingly. And so those are some of the different types of databases that we've built. And in your brainstorming, you can think of more options for how you can bring Airtable or how you can bring new technology into your business. And if you are curious, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. I've got a 30-minute free initial consultation, which we can use to either talk about how to implement Airtable for your business, or sorry, for your organization, or we can talk about new systems that you're thinking about evaluating. Normally, my conversations are around Airtable, but if anyone in this community wants to just grab some time and talk about technology strategy, I'm happy to have a conversation with you around that. Yeah, I would love to connect. And ultimately, I think before you reach out to anyone, to me, or before you dive in to implementing a new system, I think it's very important to think about how your systems align with your values, or how the systems will drive your mission and purpose forward. So in thinking about how I can illustrate this point, I decided to share a few values that I've implemented internally for my team. And our 6 values are excellent quality, which means delivering good quality work for our clients, whether they're in the private sector or public sector or nonprofit side, and investing in people. So I think with many of our clients and my employees internally, we want to make sure everyone is growing, whether it's in their ability to use Airtable or in their team's ability to kind of embrace new tools and training. There's lots of that. And integrity and trust, we think it's a great privilege to be able to work with clients like Justice at Last and Freedom Network, because these are strategically incredibly important projects for the programs that are getting offered or scaling their organization. So it's very important that we earn that trust and keep our clients' data safe. And of course, everyone owns their own data. And we're really here to kind of facilitate and empower our clients. Our values also are around teamwork. So we try to work with our clients hand in hand, kind of talking to them about their processes, offer suggestions for improvements, and there's lots of dialogue as we had been working together. And ultimately, it's all about helping our clients grow, and whether it's grow their scale of programs or help them become more efficient at doing something. And ultimately, your systems, as you're thinking about this, should really tie in together with your values or with the purpose of the organization. Amanda, is that how you think about systems as well?
Yeah, so I see a few of the qualities and values that you've listed are values that we have at our organization as well. I think we definitely value working collaboratively, making sure that we get investment from all of our partners and that we are taking into consideration everyone's input. So being able to easily collaborate and see everyone's work through Airtable makes the collaboration process so much smoother and improves the quality of work that we are able to produce.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think systems are there to improve and help organizations grow. And I think they're really a great complement to the values and purpose for organizations.
Absolutely.
So last but not least, we come back to our 2x2 graph of where we spend our time. So, maybe I didn't change your mind about technology being in category 2, but hopefully that has just become not urgent, but more important than it was before. Or maybe for some of you, you do think that, well, technology is actually urgent and important because it's a way to help our teams work better. And we do want to adopt technology for the new era. So lots of food for thought. Yeah. Sorry,
I was just going to add in, when you can see the improvements that having proper systems in place provide, I think you can see the urgency there when you're thinking like, oh, wow, it does take me, 2 weeks to gather all this data for our grant reporting. And I could cut that down to a day or two if I have the proper systems in place. I think that's where you kind of start to see it like, okay, we can move that closer to category 1 where we can see some urgency there.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe this is right after every quarter is when technology becomes more urgent as you're doing your reporting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it flows back and forth depending on what you're doing that day. Excellent. So last but not least, we can't become what we want by remaining what we are. Again, a great reminder of, if we want to have reporting very quickly at our fingertips, then there might be things that need to change and we have to embrace that change. So it's a great reminder to keep an open mind. Absolutely. And to talk to your team about technology. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending our talk. It's been
and then Cherry, could you actually go back to the slide with your contact information?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone has that available now that we're at the end. And yeah, I can't say enough as far as working with Cherry and with AirOps has been a great process for us. And they've made things fairly simple when we've had a lot of different complex issues and complex tasks that we wanted to do within Airtable. So yeah, definitely reach out and see what opportunities they can provide for your organization.
Thank you so much for that shout out, Amanda.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. And we've got about half an hour for Q&A, so I will be on the edge of my seat, hoping to answer some of your questions.
All right, so we'll stop our recording here. So thank you, everyone.